Before you ever start creating your database in Access, you should begin by trying to plan your database. And the first step of that plan is to consider what the purpose of your database is going to be. You want to design your database so that it accommodates all of your data processing and reporting needs. So start by gathering and organizing all the information that you'll want to include, like any forms or lists that you have, and think about what kind of reports you'll want to be able to create using your database data. After you've decided how you'll use all that information, you can categorize the information by dividing it into subjects. And those different subjects will become the tables in your database. Each table should only contain the information that is related to that specific subject. If you find yourself adding something extra, you might need to create a new table. And in your database table, your data is stored in rows and columns. Each row is called a record, and each column is called a field. So for example, if you have a student list table, each row might contain your records of all of your different students. Like you see here, you have students 1 through 12. And then each column contains a field such as ID, company, last name, first name, and so on. So in this particular database, we have several fields that hold our information, and then we have 12 different records. You'll want to organize each piece of information into the smallest useful part. For example, if one of your pieces of information is going to be names of students, you don't want to have your field just be name. You'll want to organize it into two fields, last name and first name. That will make it much easier if you ever need to sort or filter your students by name. For each table, you will also have a primary key, which is a column that uniquely identifies each row. So in a student database, a good field that might be used as primary key might be your ID or your student ID number. That is because that is something that no two students would have the same. Whereas if you tried to use last name or first name, you might have many students that have the same name, but none of your students should have the same ID number. And the primary key has to be something that none of your records are going to have the same. When you're designing your database, you'll also set a data type for each of your fields, and that's going to match the information that it needs to store. It might be text, a number, date or time, or some other type of data. And you'll want to define them as specifically as possible. So for example, you can see different types of data types in the fields that we have listed here. To get a good look at those, we will switch to Design View, where you can actually see each data type laid out for you. So we have a mixture of auto number, short text, date and time, and number. If you look at the lower pane, once you have selected a data type, you see the field properties, and you can change that data type by clicking on it and then selecting the drop down. Down in the field properties, you can see things such as the field size, whether or not it is a required entry, and other information about that data type. So for example, our student ID is short text and the field size is only 20 because a student ID number is not going to be longer than 20 characters. Whereas some of our other short text types of field names might be a little bit longer because something like a company name might be longer than 20 characters. Switching back to Datasheet view, you can see that our fields of student ID and company don't have any data in them. That is because they were marked as not required in the field properties. When a new field in a table is created and you enter data, Access will automatically try to detect the appropriate data type for that field. When you key in a price, such as $10, Access will recognize it as a price and set it as currency. If it can't recognize the data type, it will set it as short text data, and that is used to store up to 255 characters. Long text data will display up to 64,000 characters. So would be used if you have a lot of data that might be typed into that field.